Hello everybody, Dave Neal here, stand-up comic and host of Bachelor Nation News. In this next video, we have a member of what was supposed to be the current season of The Bachelor, which begins filming today. Cut from the production. Reality Steve has an update. Vanessa Esparson was one of the cuts pre-show and won't be on the season of The Bachelor. So we're going to get into this story. Follow me on Instagram at DNeals. I'm also going to be live on Patreon at 10:30 a.m. today, patreon.com/Dave Neal. So he tweeted this update. And of course, this was in response to a tweet he put out Friday, taking a break from posting contestants to share the disturbing Facebook post from Vanessa from 2016. A reader easily found this within 5 minutes of me posting Vanessa as a contestant. This was not some witch hunt. It's very easy to find. I discussed this in today's Daily Roundup. If you search her name right here, you can see maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 posts down that in 2016 it shows her screen grabs. So this isn't hard to find. It really is just very, very simple. Boom, there it is. June 9th from 2016. So there was the Facebook post that she had, not defending Brock, but why is this girl also not at fault for how much she drank? She was 3 times above the legal limit. Of course, this is just not the way you would hope someone would treat a situation that involved a very, very contentious and horrific legal issue that existed where the judge was recalled because he didn't give Brock Turner much jail time, even though he was, all very, very nasty situation. So this poses the question that a lot of people are asking, which is, did Reality Steve get her canceled? We're going to share that in a second, but here's a clip from his roundup today, and we'll discuss this about how far should the show go to protect contestants or vet contestants and find out if they are sort of worthy of going on the show, or, do skeletons in the closet get in the way of where someone may be today. No word from Vanessa yet, no apology or statement, but let's just have a listen.
Esparson, who had a Facebook post in 2016 right after the Brock Turner verdict came down, and we all know how problematic that was. Well, we don't all know because the amount of, she's not wrong, Steve. Oh, good God. The amount of those that we had, kind of surprising to say.
I mean, I'm not surprised at all. But so when you look at the actual post that I just lost it. If you look at the actual post, the problem right here is, why is the girl not at fault? Well, she's not at fault because it's not illegal. Just because you had drinks doesn't mean you should have your be violated in that sort of manner. We don't need to relitigate that whole issue. You guys know where I stand on it. But let's just listen to Reality Steve responding to people that sort of claim that, this is like a cancel culture issue here.
People who came after me saying, why are you trying to cancel this girl? There was nothing about canceling Vanessa. Nothing I said in my podcast on Friday, nothing I tweeted out after the podcast was up on Friday was about canceling Vanessa. I'm not canceling anybody. My point was, for her own good and the show's, she shouldn't have been cast after that came up, because it would have been a whole ordeal once she was on the show if she ever made it. And she didn't, so we don't have to worry about it. But this idea that people came to me with, she's got a point, Steve, and what happened to freedom of speech? I'll go over both of those points right now.
Freedom of speech.
She didn't have a point when her first sentence said, not defending Brock Turner, but. Because the very next, it wasn't even the next, the first sentence was not defending Brock Turner. Her second sentence was, but why is the girl also not at fault for how much she drank? She was 3 times above the legal limit. Right there. Everything else she wrote after that was meaningless. It was pointless. Because everything else she wrote about that was in support of that sentence right there. Why was the girl also not at fault for how much she drank?
Now, of course, we know the legal limit refers to driving in a vehicle, not whether or not you should be assaulted behind a dumpster, right? So anyway, I think the issue with this story, while this is important, I think everyone should go check out Reality Steve's Daily Roundup here on his podcast. Find that wherever you listen to podcasts, or just go to realitysteve.com. I think what's interesting here is the conversation regarding redemption, the conversation regarding, can someone grow from their viewpoints? Let's assume Vanessa Esparson's 26 years old, right? So 6 years ago, she would have been 20. She wouldn't even have been legally allowed to drink. What life choices has she made where she can empathize with this scenario? Now, you might say, like we've got a lot of people say, well, I would have known better than to take that point of view. I totally understand. But at that age, whether it's 15 or 20, even 23, 24, at that age, you're still living under whatever sort of like AM radio opinions your parents have, or some coach that is your mentor, whatever their beliefs are. You still have these imprints from others. You're what I believe yet to be truly your own, opinionated person, because you haven't traveled, you haven't lived in other parts of the world or the country. So my belief here, not to apologize for her, but my belief here is that she may have completely different viewpoints 6 years later, having left whatever bubble she would have been in. So I'd be interested to hear what she has to say, just to get a just to get a general conversation going regarding that, and we'll have to let you know if we get any comment from her. A separate yet sort of related story here is this lady Marilyn.movies on TikTok posted, "Why do progressive people keep watching The Bachelor?" So it's this idea that the fandom has sort of changed in recent years to be, I hate to even use the W word, woke, but the idea that we're holding people to a higher standard that didn't exist before. As we know, Lee from Rachel's season and past seasons, there's been problematic tweets and problematic contestants and racist this and racist that. It's not a new issue, but now we are linked together with, I would say, like a higher power of collective bargaining to try to, cast people that are special, that don't fall to this sort of like base level of ignorance, that don't have these problematic past behind them, or if they do, they at least address them in a sort of enlightened way. We hold people to a higher standard, is the point, than we used to. Now, that's not a bad thing per se, but let's just listen. This is a 3-minute clip. I'm going to play the full thing. Let's listen to what Marilyn says here. She actually had a dissertation on Bachelor's progressive fandom, and, rather than get triggered by hearing someone talk about being progressive or conservative and make this whole political thing where we have to be on one side or another, let's just try our best to be open-minded and hear what she has to say.
I wrote my master's dissertation on The Bachelor, specifically on why progressive people are such insane super fans like me, even when the show is totally racist, sexist, homophobic, ableist, and the list goes on. I'm trying to understand what happens when you have a progressive fandom on one side and very conservative, regressive content, and that fandom is really locked in a pattern of critiquing it, and there's all these podcasts and books and this discourse that I love being a part of. But are we shouting into the void, or are we like posturing at being liberal so that we can just enjoy this silly show? And is that okay, or is that like super nefarious? So in order to answer this question, I had to read a ton of literature on fan studies, the history of reality television, and get a sense of what academics have said about the show so far. And there is writing about The Bachelor, but I find a lot of it is from the early years of the show and doesn't capture the kind of insanity of Bachelor Nation in the past few years. And there's a lot of assumptions about how audiences actually act and how they feel. An example of a theory that's not really empirically tested is the idea that audiences are locked in an irony bribe, which means that you're watching the show with this ironic, critical stance, but in the process of watching it and making fun of it, you end up being indoctrinated by what the show is saying anyway. So, like, for example, I can sit here and critique it, but does watching the show every week for so many years of my life end up, like, making me take in that I should get married and I should do these things and pause my career and have kids, like everything the show is telling us? I also build off a theory called cruel optimism developed by Lauren Berlant. And essentially, cruel optimism describes a relation wherein you desire an object that impedes your own flourishing. It's fundamentally about longing for the good life, seeking the change that's going to come or the change that's not going to come, and the circuit of hope and disappointment that desire produces. I'm fascinated by this idea of us as Bachelor Nation watching the show, hoping that it changes, but always expecting that it's going to hurt us. Especially when the person watching is a very active fan who's a black woman, for example, because the show has such a long history of hurting that marginalized group. Berlant also talks about this modern desire to feel political together, basically meaning that we're searching for an alternative commons where we're not talking about specific policy and politics, but we're feeling these political questions in dialogue. And I feel like the discourse in Bachelor Nation does that for a lot of us, or at least me. Anyway, after I did all this research, I got to have these amazing interviews with fans from all walks of life. And in conclusion, I think Bachelor Nation is so awesome and so smart, and we're a little bit fucked.
All right. Well, that's a very interesting. I'd have to probably watch that 10 more times to grapple with half the stuff she's saying there. But yeah, it comes down to a wild fandom that expects perfection out of what we see on the screen. And again, it's not perfect to expect someone to have a better take on a Brock Turner issue. But we do expect a flawlessly politically correct, well, I shouldn't say flawlessly, but because you can see here now I'm trying to catch my words. We do expect the show to represent morally a world we are sort of hoping for. We hope that there's equality. We hope that people aren't superficial and they're not choosing each other based on looks. We hope that they can find love on TV. We hope for all these things, but the show just continues to remind us that when they put flawed people in these scenarios of no social media, lack of sleep, lack of food, it kind of reduces us to this tribal, ugly way, which is great for drama, but it just goes to feed into the idea that they're no better than us. Everyone's trying their best with the info they have. And there is something to be said about a sort of moral outrage that we all get when we see someone like Vanessa with those tweets. We go, I would have never done that. I would have never done blackface in 2011. I would have never done fill in the blank of whatever it was. It puts us on the winning side, which we all want to be on. I think the true side we need to be on is that flawed people, ignorance, people trying their best, but coming from a place or in the wrong spot. I think that all exists, whether we want it to or not, and we need to have space for having the conversations to make things better. All right, let me know what you guys think. I'll be live on Patreon right after this, and more content coming your way. We'll talk to you guys soon. Bye, everybody.